Across the sun-drenched plazas and bustling streets of Latin America, a sentiment simmers beneath the surface resentment. This resentment, directed towards the United States, is not new. It is rooted in a long and complicated history marked by interventionism, economic exploitation, and political meddling. From the Monroe Doctrine to the Cold War, the US has often treated Latin America as its own backyard, intervening in its affairs with little regard for the region's sovereignty. This historical baggage continues to cast a long shadow over US-Latin America relations. The legacy of US-backed coups, support for authoritarian regimes, and economic policies that often benefited US interests at the expense of local populations has fostered a deep-seated distrust and animosity towards the colossus of the North. In recent years, this resentment has been further inflamed by a perception that the US has turned its back on the region, focusing instead on other geopolitical priorities. The election of Donald Trump, with his rhetoric about building walls and his disdain for multilateralism, only exacerbated these feelings of abandonment and anger. His administration's policies, such as separating migrant families at the border and withdrawing from regional agreements, further alienated many Latin American governments and citizens. While the Biden administration has sought to repair some of the damage, the wounds of the past run deep. The US is no longer the only game in town. New players eager to challenge US dominance and exploit this growing anti-American sentiment have entered the scene. Russia, Iran, and China, each with their own agendas and ambitions, are actively courting Latin American nations, offering alternative partnerships and challenging the traditional US hegemony in the region. This new geopolitical landscape presents both challenges and opportunities for the US as it seeks to navigate a region in flux and redefine its role in the 21st century. In the realm of geopolitics, old alliances shift and new partnerships emerge. This is evident in the burgeoning relationship between Russia, Iran, and Venezuela, a trio united by their shared antipathy towards the United States. This alliance, while seemingly disparate, is built on a foundation of mutual convenience and a desire to undermine US influence in the region. Russia under Vladimir Putin sees Latin America as fertile ground for expanding its sphere of influence and challenging US hegemony. It has found a willing partner in Venezuela, a country grappling with economic collapse and international isolation. Russia has provided Venezuela with economic lifelines, military hardware, and diplomatic support, bolstering the regime of Nicolas Maduro and defying US sanctions. Iran, too, has found common cause with Venezuela, forging a strategic partnership that extends beyond mere rhetoric. Both countries, targeted by US sanctions, have sought to circumvent these measures through cooperation in areas such as energy, finance, and trade. This partnership has also included military cooperation, with Iran supplying Venezuela with drones and other military equipment. This burgeoning axis goes beyond mere bilateral relations. It represents a concerted effort to challenge the established geopolitical order and create a multipolar world where US dominance is no longer uncontested. Russia and Iran, through their actions in Venezuela and elsewhere in Latin America, are seeking to demonstrate that the US is not the only power capable of wielding influence in the region. They are offering alternative models of partnership based on shared interests and a rejection of US hegemony. This new reality presents a challenge for the US. It can no longer take its influence in Latin America for granted. It must contend with new players, new dynamics, and a new geopolitical landscape. How the US responds to this challenge will have profound implications for the future of the region and its own standing in the world. While Russia and Iran make strategic inroads, it is China that casts the largest shadow over Latin America's future. With its insatiable appetite for resources and its ambitious global vision, China has embarked on a charm offensive in the region, wielding its economic might to forge deep ties and expand its influence. This checkbook diplomacy has seen China become a major trading partner and investor in numerous Latin American countries, funding infrastructure projects, securing access to raw materials, and forging political alliances. China's Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure project spanning continents, has found fertile ground in Latin America. From ports in Panama to railways in Argentina, China is investing billions in projects that promise economic development, but also raise concerns about debt trap diplomacy and Chinese control over strategic assets. This economic engagement is accompanied by a concerted diplomatic push, with China actively courting Latin American governments, strengthening diplomatic ties, and promoting its vision of a multipolar world order. This growing Chinese influence has not gone unnoticed in Washington. The US views China's rise in Latin America with a mix of apprehension and alarm, seeing it as a direct challenge to its own interests and influence. The Trump administration in particular adopted a confrontational approach towards China, engaging in a trade war and seeking to counter Chinese influence in the region. The Biden administration, while seeking to cooperate with China on issues like climate change, has also maintained a wary stance, recognizing the strategic challenge posed by China's growing global ambitions. The US is caught in a delicate balancing act. It must find ways to counter China's growing influence without alienating Latin American partners who welcome Chinese investment and engagement. This requires a nuanced approach, one that recognizes the legitimate development needs of Latin American countries while also safeguarding US interests and promoting democratic values. The US must offer a compelling alternative to China's model, one that is based on partnership, not exploitation, and on shared prosperity, not debt-trap diplomacy. Section 4, a region adrift, navigating the cross-currents. Latin America finds itself at a crossroads, buffeted by the cross-currents of great power competition, internal political turmoil, and the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The region is grappling with a confluence of challenges, from economic stagnation and inequality to corruption, violence, and the erosion of democratic institutions. This volatile mix has created an environment ripe for exploitation by external actors seeking to advance their agendas. The rise of anti-American sentiment, fueled by historical grievances and contemporary frustrations, has created an opening for Russia, Iran, and China to make inroads. These countries, each with their own motives and strategies, are actively seeking to capitalize on this sentiment, offering alternative partnerships and promoting narratives that challenge US influence. They have found willing partners in some Latin American governments, eager to diversify their alliances and reduce their dependence on the US. This geopolitical maneuvering is taking place against a backdrop of internal political turmoil. From the crisis in Venezuela to the rise of left-wing governments in Mexico, Argentina, and elsewhere, the region is experiencing a period of political flux. This uncertainty creates both risks and opportunities for external actors. It can lead to instability and conflict, as seen in Venezuela, but it can also create openings for new partnerships and alliances. The US, long accustomed to being the dominant external actor in Latin America, now faces a more complex and challenging environment. It must navigate a region in flux, grappling with internal divisions, external pressures, and the rise of new geopolitical players. This requires a nuanced and adaptive approach, one that recognizes the diversity of the region, addresses the legitimate concerns of its people, and offers a compelling vision for the future. Section 5, the future of US-Latin America relations, a crossroads. The future of US-Latin America relations hangs in the balance, poised at a critical juncture. The outcome of this delicate dance between cooperation and competition will have profound implications not only for the region but also for the US's global standing. The US can no longer afford to take Latin America for granted, treating it as an afterthought in its foreign policy agenda. It must recognize the region's strategic importance, its growing economic potential, and its evolving political landscape. To navigate this new reality, the US must adopt a multi-pronged approach. Firstly, it must address the historical baggage that continues to strain relations. This requires acknowledging past mistakes, engaging in honest dialogue about the legacy of interventionism, and demonstrating a genuine commitment to partnership based on mutual respect and shared prosperity. Secondly, the US must offer a compelling economic alternative to Chinese investment. This means promoting sustainable development, supporting regional integration efforts, and fostering fair trade practices that benefit both US and Latin American businesses and workers. Furthermore, the US must prioritize strengthening democratic institutions and promoting good governance in the region. This includes supporting independent media, combating corruption, and upholding the rule of law. By championing these values, the US can help create a more stable and prosperous Latin America, which in turn will benefit US interests. Lastly, the US must recognize that Latin America is not a monolithic entity. Each country has its unique history, culture, and challenges, requiring a tailored approach that reflects these nuances. The US has a choice to make. It can either cling to outdated notions of hegemony and control, risking further alienation and fueling anti-American sentiment, or it can embrace a new era of partnership based on mutual respect, shared interests, and a commitment to a more prosperous and democratic Latin America. The path chosen will determine not only the future of US-Latin America relations, but also the shape of the global order in the 21st century.